Well, anti-war protests have popped up at many U.S. college and university campuses over the past 2 weeks, and they've sparked something of a culture war, at least a shouting match in the media. The left demanding schools divest from Israel, the right denouncing elite universities. Here's Fox's Laura Ingraham.
None of these privileged brats, and believe me, they're all privileged, and their protests have anything to do with normal Americans. Everything you're seeing is entirely the result of the liberal establishment. And they wanted to turn these schools into hotbeds of radicalism.
Over 2,000 people have been arrested at the protests. MSNBC's Chris Hayes said activism is part of college education and criticized what he suggested was a disproportionate response. Take a listen.
The cumulative effect of all this coverage, along with some unverified assertions from police and politicians, has been to drive home the idea that student protests are basically a terrorist-level threat, that they have to be neutralized by battalions of cops armed like soldiers with MRAPs and sonic cannons.
The location of these protests has created something of a unique moment in the media. National outlets with big stars relying on student journalists. CNN reporter Julia Vargas Jones, herself a graduate student at the Columbia Journalism School, reported on police breaching a building and arresting several demonstrators amid a chaotic scene. Now, without a production crew, she recruited fellow students to help her broadcast live. Other CNN reporters like Stephanie Elam and Josh Campbell also highlighting the importance of student journalists.
But this is where a lot of the students had questions about where was law enforcement. In fact, the Daily Bruin, the school newspaper with the student journalists, writing today that they think UCLA is complicit.
It's worth pointing out, as our colleague Elizabeth Joseph noted, that so much of the great information we're getting is from student journalists. Some of these newspapers have been in business for over 100 years doing critical reporting.
So today we are discussing student journalism. Joining me on the line is Annika Sunkara, a student journalist at Boston's Northeastern University. From New York, we have Álvaro Guzmán Bastida, a student at Columbia, and Luca GoldMansour, a graduate student in journalism at the City University of New York. Hello to all of you, and thank you for joining us. Luca, I want to begin with you. Take us through this past week. What have you seen?
Sure. So thank you for having me. I go to the City University of New York, which is one of the campuses of CUNY, had an occupation over the last 6 days. And I'll just start by saying that CUNY is an institution that serves primarily New York's working class.
So just to be clear, Luca, this is not the privileged brats we heard Laura Ingraham talking about.
No, I kind of had to chuckle when I heard that because CUNY, to me, is a remarkable institution because it's a vehicle for social mobility in New York City. And the students at this demonstration were risking a lot to be advocates, from what I saw on the ground, against doing harm.
Yeah, and by a lot, we're talking about, at some universities, we've heard threats of expulsion, dismissals. Annika, you're a student at Northeastern University in Boston. Tell us, you're a social media editor for the school's newspaper. How important was social media in covering these protests?
Yeah, well, when the majority of your audience in this case is students, fellow young people, social media is what we've relied on to get the information out as quickly as possible in an accessible way. We are capturing video live as arrests are happening, as demonstrations are happening, and rushing to get those up on our social media. So it can be incredibly difficult to be complete and correct in our coverage, especially when it has to go out on social media as soon as possible.
Yeah, very tight deadlines, Annika, but were you and other of your colleagues having to take on added duties in what you normally perform?
Absolutely. Over at the Huntington News, I specialize in video and social media strictly, but I was also doing additional photo and written live updates coverage just because it takes all of us to produce all of these different mediums necessary to cover an encampment of this scale that is affecting colleges across the nation, not just Northeastern.
Álvaro, you are a former journalism major, now I might call you a traitor. You're a film student, a graduate student at Columbia. You have an interesting take because when you were when the protests began at Columbia, you were originally out of town, and so you were having to follow this on mass media, but also based on what your friends were saying on the ground. What did the sort of mass media get wrong about this story?
Yeah, I was out of the country as when the encampment kind of took hold, and I was kind of rushed back to campus as soon as I landed on Tuesday, and on the couple of weeks prior, the 10 days prior, when I was away, I was following in dismay because there was a huge disconnect between what I knew was happening through my classmates, through social media, like people are saying, and through outlets that are running stories that are counter to the mainstream narrative, that this was a beautiful, peaceful grassroots movement that had started from students and that was in solidarity with the people suffering the carnage and the genocide in Gaza. And yet the reporting on it was focusing on things such as, the presence of outside agitators, the presence of violence, and the idea that this was somehow anti-Semitic when it was really led often by Jews, and it was incredibly inclusive, and it was a movement again for justice, for peace, and for the putting an end on the unspeakable violence that is the violence we should be speaking about, that has killed over 40 million, nearly 40 million people in Gaza, and that, as you said, the level at the beginning of the broadcast, the levels of violence and the levels of destructions are on par with World War II.
Luca, I want to ask you. I mean, you have friends, roommates, classmates, professors, some people who are grading your papers that are attending this protest. Your responsibility as a journalist, maybe making you more impartial. Were there divisions within the newsroom as to how to cover this protest and where the boundary is between student activism and student journalism?
Yeah, so I think that was an issue that we were all working through together over the course of the 6 days. I'm alma mater at City College, but I really think that it is important for credibility's sake that I at least remove my own personal biases and just examine the evidence as a scientist would.
But when you're looking at the tensions that have been on some of these campuses, is there a feeling that life will go back to normal once things have eventually calmed down?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know what normal looks like, especially for the Arab and Muslim students at City College, who normal for the past 6 months has been either watching their family members be killed, watching people they know be killed. So I don't think that's a normal that they're willing to return to.
Yeah, indeed. Something has to improve for them. Annika, classes, as I understand, are over at Northeastern University. A bit of uncertainty as to what the next school year holds. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Northeastern saw at its peak of the encampment around 200 demonstrators. That is after classes had been over for more than a week, and finals ended on Friday, the second day of a near 48-hour encampment. So I believe that if classes or final exams were still in motion, that we would have seen even more demonstrators on Northeastern's campus. Despite this, about 100 arrests were still made. I think that speaks a lot to the power of and the scope and the magnitude of the encampment that we saw at Northeastern. And as for the year ahead, I mean, I don't see this easily fading from the university's reputation and history. I've conducted personal interviews with students around campus who both did participate in the encampment, were either arrested or not arrested, or didn't participate at all and have stood by and watched. And people are not happy with the university. They've said that the university has acted tone deaf, that they're above all trying to maintain an image. And we have our commencement going on today. People have not, on multiple sides, seem to have forgiven the university just yet.
Yeah, and the important thing I think to remind our viewers is university in the United States, it's a very, very expensive endeavor. It's something where you have paying customers from all races, from all creeds. So finding a way to get everyone to at least be getting along is a very tricky situation. At Northeastern, what were the demands in regards to the university leadership? Are you wanting to see a resignation, a change, or just compromises on something like a divestment from Israel?
So Northeastern students' demands were very similar to the three main ones that we're seeing at universities across the country right now, which is to, one, disclose financial ties to Israel and the military-industrial complex, two, to divest the university's endowment holdings from companies that do business with Israel. And the third is to denounce what demonstrators are calling a genocide in Gaza. So those are the three demands. Students haven't voiced many clear demands demanding the resignation of any administrators, but I can tell you that the university, in the aftermath of our demonstration, has released some statements that students are not happy with, and we may see further action and further demands made in the coming days, weeks, maybe even next semester, as long as the war goes on.
One final question. This one's for you, Alvaro. You have family following the situation from overseas. They're trying to figure out if their son's in danger or not. What did you tell them?
It's funny you should ask. I mean, I've been telling them, sending them videos and photos of what I was seeing. I think they're proud. They're happy that I'm part of it. They're also concerned, though, because a lot of the coverage has they're concerned for two reasons. One, because they saw the images of the incredible police violence that was waged upon us and upon the people who were actually occupying the building and in the encampment. And then also, a lot of the coverage has unfortunately highlighted the fact that there was allegedly violence on the part of the protesters, which is a gross mischaracterization and a manipulation of the record. We were responding non-violently to a hugely violent situation, and the response on us was a warlike deployment of police that of course made my mom very upset and worried for me.
Yeah, I'm guessing a lot more ink will be spilled on this subject. I want to thank all our guests, Álvaro, Luca, and Annika, joining us on the line about their personal experiences covering this story. That also brings us to our quote of the week. On Wednesday, the Dean of Journalism at Columbia University wrote a memo to his students saying, quote, "You are part of history now. Your perseverance during a confusing and challenging moment cannot be understated. You told the stories the global public deserved to hear." That coming from Jelani Cobb. No doubt that many other deans across the country feel the same way about their students. That's it for this edition of Scoop. Thank you for watching. Please stay tuned to France 24.